What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about how Brits use numbers differently. Now, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what that actually means. I thought numbers were pretty universal, to be honest, but apparently we use numbers differently between America and Britain. So I'm really curious to learn today what that actually means. So let's take a look.
American addresses definitely have longer house numbers, but British addresses have longer postcodes. So it all evens out. In fact, let me give you some examples of
Okay.
what I mean. From memory, every single address that I had in Britain comprised of 2 digits. And pound for pound, the experience of most British people is that their house address won't ever exceed 3 digits.
Oh, that's what we're talking about. Okay, this is very interesting. Like, so anything that uses numbers between America and Britain might be different. For example, our addresses use numbers differently. Okay, that's very interesting. Matt, so, okay, I'm digesting what we're learning here. Okay, got it. And in Britain, home addresses only have two numbers. Really? I can't name a single British address, to be honest, so I never really thought about this. Yeah, here in America, like every address has four numbers, like 8752 Sunflower Road, you know? But in Britain, it's only two or three. That actually sounds a lot more convenient to be. That actually sounds better. I don't know. Wait, how do you even do that? Well, I guess every street probably has no more than 99 houses. Well, actually, he said you can have up to 3 digits on a British address. So you can have up to 999 houses on your street, and this still works. Why do we have 4 digits in our American addresses? Why do we even do that? I've never even thought about that. It doesn't even make sense.
There are occasional exceptions to that, but in America, those exceptions seem to, in fact, be the rule. Because at virtually all of the places that I've lived in the US, the house or the apartment number has been in the thousands.
Yes. Yeah, and it's not the end of the world, but you gotta like memorize 4 digits, which is that can be hard. Maybe just for me. But certainly harder than remembering two or three. And it's like for every street, there's not going to be 1,000 houses. So why are we labeling them in the thousands? I've never thought about this.
And also, at some of these addresses, the American street name itself might contain a number, like 321st Avenue. They don't usually go that high. But 2nd
Yeah.
Street. In Britain, a street that's also a number is very uncommon to the extent that I'm not sure they even exist. However,
Yeah. In a lot of cities, there always seems to be like First Street or Third Avenue. Is that an American thing? I never even realized that. But yeah, it's just like the number and then street. And it seems to be in most American cities, like everywhere, is there's a first street and a second street. And I didn't know that was an American thing.
as I said, Britain has America beat when it comes to the size of our postcodes. And if for whatever reason you're confused by the term
Oh.
postcode, it is simply what Americans know as a zip code.
Right.
You see, in Britain, a postcode can range from 6 to 8 characters, where
Right, I actually learned about this very, very recently, funny enough, about British postal codes, not zip codes. We call them zip codes. British postal codes have a lot more like information in them, and they're longer and better. That's what I determined. They're just better than the zip codes we use in America. Seriously.
where in the US it's just 5.
Yeah.
However, notice there that I said characters and not numbers. Well, since this video is all about numbers, there is something to keep in mind here. British postcodes are a combination of letters and numbers,
Oh, yeah. Postal codes, British postal codes can have letters as a part of them. I already forgot that. Oh my gosh. And all of this like means stuff And apparently, just by using a British postal code, you can really, really, really narrow down pretty accurately, like what street somebody lives on just by knowing their postal code. I think that's correct. Whereas in America, a zip code, that's like that's like half the town. That's like you're not going to find someone's house with their zip code. So that's another reason postal codes seem better.
Meaning that American zip codes probably have more numbers, but that's whatever.
Phone
One
numbers.
other series of digits over which Britain has America beat is phone numbers, actually. Typically speaking, if you're
Really?
not calling from overseas, in which we would need to use a country code, then a UK phone number usually consists of 11 digits. US phone numbers, meanwhile, consist of 10, basically.
This is so interesting. It's so funny that there's these small little differences between how numbers are used in America versus Britain. I didn't understand what this video was going to be when I first saw it, but this is really intriguing to me. Our phone numbers are different. Our addresses, our postal codes are different. Our phone numbers are different. There's an extra digit in a British phone number. I never knew that. Or if you're British, us Americans have one less digit, I guess you could say, from your point of view.
Basically 2 zip codes put together. The major difference here comes in the area code. For the first 20 years of my life, growing up in Grimsby, my area code was 01472.
Wait, this is an area code? This whole thing? This whole number? 5 digits in the area code? 5? We have area codes here. They're only 3 digits. I want to see a British phone number just like spelled out in front of me now, because this is much stranger than I thought.
Years of my life, growing up in Grimsby, my area code was 01472, 5 digits. But it's worth keeping in mind that that only applies to landline phones. In the last 25 years, of course, we've seen the rise of the mobile phone and or calculator. In Britain, unlike with landline phones, these are not assigned an area code. In fact, I think most, if not all, mobile phones in the UK begin with the digits 07. Incidentally, those are...
Wait, what? Hold up. Hold up. Let me go back here. This is what a British phone number looks like? This is so strange to me. Do most British people out there know what an American phone number looks like? Because the format is very different. So, and now we're also saying that British cell phones don't have an area code? But it looks to me like there is a 5-digit area code right there on this cell phone. So that's a little confusing to me. Anyway, in America, it's a 3-digit area code, then 3 more digits, then 4 digits. So quite different.
Incidentally, those are 2 digits that are going to be very important later on in this video, so keep watching. In America, I was surprised to find that this was quite different, because your mobile, or cell phone as it's usually known in the US, will usually carry the same area code as your landline phone.
Yeah, what's up with that? In America, it's like, who even has a landline anymore to begin with? Like a regular phone plugged into a wall. Who's even heard of such a thing? But those had area codes in Britain, and in America, our cell phones all have area codes too. It was just like the exact same. There was no switching over of the format.
If you still have a landline phone. So for example, the first place that I lived was Anderson, Indiana. And that city is in a region of Indiana that carries the area code 765. So all of the landlines there begin 765.
Yeah.
And if you purchase your cell phone there, most likely that too will have the same area code.
Yeah.
And most states, like Indiana and my current state of Illinois, are home to multiple area codes, which is why it was surprising to discover there are in fact 12 states, including the behemoth that is Alaska, that have just one. And that's
Really? I'm surprised about that. So I'm guessing throughout the UK, there's all sorts of different area codes depending on what area you live in. Makes sense. And in America, usually a state has quite a few different area codes depending on where you live. I didn't know Alaska. Alaska has one. That's a fun fact.
And that's because said states have more cows than people, probably.
grade levels.
Earlier on, when I said this, just to stick it to my Year 10 maths teacher who told me that I'd never have such luxury, it did occur to me that my thousands of American viewers might have been thinking, what's Year 10? Was Lawrence born in the 1st century? No.
Yeah. I've heard of this before. I am familiar with this now. That in the UK, you don't say 10th grade, you say grade 10, which is just the most British sounding thing ever.
No. A year in this instance is the equivalent of what Americans would call a grade at school. And it just happens that this particular example is a year populated by 14 to 15-year-olds.
Huh. So this confuses me too. You would say grade 10, and that is a year, whereas we'd say 10th grade, and that is a grade level. Like I don't know. There's a little difference in the terminology, I think.
And you might be thinking, ooh, Lawrence, that's not 10, that's grade 9. Well, actually, it's both, you see, from between the ages of 5 to 6, British children begin what is known as Year 1. But as I discovered while watching the documentary The Kindergarten Cop, Americans don't call that the 1st grade, they call it kindergarten.
Yeah. I've tried to understand this before. Apparently, like, Americans and Brits were off by a grade level in how we label grades. So our kindergarten is a British Year 1. So our 1st grade is British Year 2, and it's off by 1, and it definitely is too much for my American brain to comprehend. So.
Oh, and speaking of years, that brings us on to this.
Dates.
I think at this point, most of us are probably aware that Britain and America can't agree on how to write the date. Obviously, in Britain, it's day 1st, month 2nd, and year last.
Really? This is how you always do dates in Britain. Day, then month, then year. We of course do month, day, year, you know? When I see it, like, written out like this, doesn't this actually make more sense? Oh no. This is becoming a pattern here. A lot of the ways that Brits use numbers makes a little more sense to me. How did this happen? What? Because days is the lowest, like, I don't know, the lowest measurement. Days, then what bigger would be months. And bigger than months would be years, so they're in order chronologically of how big of a time measurement they are: day, month, year. That would make sense. I don't know why we do month, day, year, but I'm very, very, very used to it. Like, when I hear a date, I expect there's something comforting about knowing the month first. Like, if you said your birthday is on 13th, and I'd be like, 13th of what? What month? What? But here it's like, yeah, my birthday is January 3rd. It's like, okay.
As evidenced by our famous Guy Fawkes slogan, remember, the 5th of November. Whereas in America, of course, it's flipped, as evidenced by July the 4th. Americans usually say the 4th of July. I don't know why they do that.
I don't know why either. I don't know why either. Now that I hear it. Yeah, every other time we say, like December 12th or May 3rd. But we say 4th of July. What's that about?
But for everything else, it's the month 1st and the day 2nd. Why do they do that? Well, you'll just have to watch my YouTube short all about it.
Social Security numbers.
One of my longtime patrons.
Social Security numbers. Do they have Social Security numbers in Britain? Or something like, do you call it that? And is it this? It's like a personal identification number?
Jeff asked me on this week's secret live stream. In the US, most people have memorized their phone numbers and social security numbers. What personal numbers are people expected to know in Britain? And phone numbers used to be one of those until we didn't need to anymore. But our equivalent of America's social security number is our national insurance number.
Oh, what is this? National Insurance Number Card? How big is this number? And this has something to do with insurance? Like maybe like health insurance or I don't understand why insurance is part of this, actually.
Or, as it's known intimately to me, nin. Nobody calls it that, really. So, what are the major numerical differences between an SSN and a nin? Well, for once, it isn't the number of characters, because an SSN has 9 and a nin has 9. Try saying that after 7 white Russians. So the difference here is similar to zip codes versus postcodes. A nin is comprised of 2 letters, followed by 6 numbers, and another letter for good.
Oh, wow. Brits really like to incorporate letters into your numbers. That's something I'm noticing too. So it's 2 letters, then 2 numbers, 2 numbers, 2 numbers, then a letter? Okay, I mean, for me, I don't think it really makes a difference. Like the format of your personal identification number, whether that's a social security number here or a national insurance number in Britain. It's like, it's not a number like that you use all that much. So it's like, and it's just like for the government, right? So whatever.
Good measure. In the US, it's all numbers. America doesn't like letters. The first set of 3 digits
Yes.
is the area number. The second set of 2 digits is the group number. And then the final set of 4 digits is the serial number.
I'm American and I didn't even know what the different groupings of numbers mean. You just memorize your number and put it on paperwork during your life.
We all care about that, obviously. The point is, I have both a NIN and an SSN, so I'm special.
Time.
Time. Is it real? Oh, that's a different video. Well, sometimes, to people like me who've lived on 3 different time zones, time can feel like it's ahead of its time. So I don't want to get bogged down in that, because there are other differences to talk about, namely how we tell the time. For instance, in Britain,
There's differences in how we tell the time in America versus Britain. How we tell the time, there's a difference. How can that be?
in Britain, if the time is 9:15, we might well say it's 9:15. In America, you often hear a 9:15, and similarly, Brits might refer to 9:30 as 9:30, whereas Americans might say 9:30. But
I mean, we would understand in America 9:15, like, how did he say it exactly?
9:15. In America, you often Britain, if the time is 9:15, we might well say it's 9:15.
9:15. I would understand that. People say that in America too.
In America, you often hear a 9:15 and
A 9:15, a 9:15. It's all the same. No one would think that is strange to hear it either way.
similarly, Brits might refer to 9:30 as 9:30.
Now that is strange. It's so funny. What things are strange and what aren't? Just the smallest little things. 9:30, I'd turn my head and be like, huh? 9:30? Why did you say it like that? But it's so close to the American way. We would say 9:30, 9:30. It almost is the same, but it still sounds a bit weird to me.
Whereas Americans might say 9:30. But
Yeah.
the biggest difference between British and American digital clocks can be seen once we get to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At that point in America, clocks will simply say 1 o'clock. But not in Britain, where it suddenly goes from 12:59 to 13 o'clock. And that's because British clocks are on military time. And when
They are. They are? British clocks are on military time. I never realized that. Because that I'm shocked. That is such a significant difference. I know about military time because some people in America, if you're in the military, use it. So I've heard of it here and there. Like 13 meaning 1. But British people just used this all the time? Really? I did not know that.
When I lived in Britain, I never knew this as military time. In fact, it was Americans that alerted me to this term. I just thought of it as time, like the whole world does this. And
Oh my God, yeah. That's so crazy. That's so funny. Yeah, British people, you would just call this the time. Not we call it military time because only the military uses this format in America. If I'm being honest, if I'm passing judgment here, Military time does make more logical sense. I don't know what British people call it, just the time. British time, we'll say. Because if you say 1 o'clock in America, it can mean two things. It can mean 1 in the morning, 1 a.m., or it can mean 1 in the afternoon, 1 p.m. But, so you don't even use a.m. or p.m. in Britain. Is that right? I just can't wrap my head around this. Right, because you can just say, well, how do you say it? 13 o'clock? Or how do you say it? It's 16 o'clock? Or how do you even say it?
Now that I know that it is military time, I'm confused that America doesn't do it because they have the biggest military in the world. And then I found that the US military does do it, but the
Yes.
general public doesn't. Either way, to this very day, I instinctively know that 7 p.m. in the evening, that last word was redundant, is equal to 19 o'clock. I should point
You do say 19 o'clock. I was wondering if you just keep saying it like 1 o'clock, then, or you don't say 1 o'clock. You'd say 13 o'clock, right? Oh my, this is too hard for me. But my point is, it makes more sense because in America, there's two different 2 o'clocks, two different 3 o'clocks. Whereas in Britain, if you're using this system, every hour of the day has its own number. Which, to me, I can't argue, it does make more sense. It does.
out that British people don't go around saying 19 o'clock. In conversation, we would say 7, which makes it even weirder, I suppose, that our
Okay, what? Okay, what? No. Okay. So, is this true? You don't say 19 o'clock. I was getting way too excited about that. I thought I understood. You don't say 19 o'clock. You would say 7 o'clock. Somehow, so it defeats the purpose. I guess it's easier to read. What? Wait, huh?
clocks don't do that.
What?
But anyway, a moment ago when I was talking about quarters, there was one thing that I forgot to mention because it wasn't quite relevant yet, and that's how the two countries refer to a quarter as in the fraction. Because I've noticed that Americans, like my wife for example, use the words quarter and 1/4 interchangeably.
This is getting too weird. This is getting too crazy. Now we use a quarter differently, so the mathematical term, a quarter of a pie, would be 1/4 of a pie. What would that mean in Britain?
But having grown up in Britain, 1/4 always sounds weird to me because I think we would only say quarter in that context.
Okay.
But I'm afraid that I'm going to have to interrupt myself there with a couple of caveats. The first of those is we don't have special words for other fractions except for half. But then again, if you were to say 1/2, you could get confused with the time. And the other thing that might explain why Americans often plump for 1/4 is that a quarter is already part of the national dialogue.
Yeah.
Because that's the name of an American coin of the same name.
True.
Did you edit this?
True. 0.
And I want to finish this video by talking about 3 numbers in particular, the first of which is 0. Is 0 a number? I'm no mathematician. And 0 is an interesting one to me because both countries have synonyms of the word 0 that the other country doesn't have. In America,
Okay.
somebody might say, I got zilch, as in
That was a good impersonation. Yes, in American, yes, that's fairly common. If you're saying you have 0 of something, and you want to be a bit, I don't know, sassy, I'd say, I got zip, nada, zilch. Those all mean 0 or none.
I've got nothing. Whereas Britain's alternatives for this nice round number are often context dependent. Firstly, you've got nil, which
Nil.
you often find in sport.
Nil. I've heard of nil. We don't use nil in America, but I've heard of this.
As in, Grimsby Town Football Club won the FA Cup final 6-0, whereas
Right.
American commentators are more likely to say 6-0
Yeah.
or 6-zilch. And then there's the word naught, which from memory is what I called 0 when I was a little kid. But it's
Oh, not. Where have I heard not? Nobody uses not in America. I think it might be sort of used as a financial term here.
also used in the title of a game that Americans call tic-tac-toe, a game that we call noughts and crosses. And remember...
Tic-tac-toe has a different name, and this video is blowing my mind with all the random little differences. What do you call it?
That Americans call tic-tac-toe, a game that we call noughts and crosses.
Noughts and crosses. Nice, because it's a zero. And noughts and I never heard of that.
And remember earlier when I said this? My area code was 01472. This use of O to denote 0 in phone numbers is not something you often hear in America, where the preferred option would be 01472.
Right. 7.
And then there were 7, or 2 actually, but 7 is one of them. Here in the United States, the number 7 is almost always written with one horizontal stroke and one diagonal stroke.
Right.
But as many observant Americans have often pointed out to me, this is not always the case in Britain, where to that we like to add another horizontal stroke through the middle.
Oh, that's where this comes from. That's where this comes from, because very, very randomly, I'll see the 7 written this way. And I have no idea what it's about. I have no idea what's going on or why. It's the British way of writing 7, with the cross through it. Oh my God, this is all coming together.
And you might be thinking, why do you do that? And the answer is simple: to avoid confusion with the number 1.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I just never knew.
To all of the Americans laughing at this idea, 7-Eleven agrees with me. I've just realised that's probably not an argument in my favour.
Billion.
And finally, how do you define 1 billion? Well, most people today who have a grasp of big numbers would tell you 1,000 million. But try telling that to British people from before the 70s. And that's because before 1974, British people, as well as a host of other countries, defined a billion as 1 million million, otherwise known as a long billion or...
Huh? What? This was in the 70s? Only like 50 years ago. Britain had a different definition of billion? That's strange. Or did you call it a long billion? A million? That's a lot.
Or more commonly, a trillion. And you might be thinking, what did those British people call 1,000 million? And the answer is simple: 1,000 million. However, all of this ceased to be the case when we followed the American example, a decision that was taken by 69th UK Prime Minister Harold Wilson.
That's funny. Britain actually had like a time where you passed a law or whatever, where you decided, okay, we're going to stop saying 1,000 million. That's funny that happened. And okay, I think with that, that's a good place to stop. That was really, really intriguing. Honestly, a lot more interesting than I ever thought. This video is by Lost in the Pond, and I got to give it a like because that was very enjoyable. Holy cow, there's a lot of differences between how Brits and Americans use numbers. I didn't understand what it meant, but now I do. It's absolutely true. We do. And in quite a few different ways, I have to admit, British people seem to use numbers a bit better with your different date formats and time formats and other stuff. It just seems to make a little more sense, which is kind of funny to me. Americans have no idea. Well, at least this American does now. Very interesting. I enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on how Brits and Americans use numbers differently, what you thought of all this. That'd be very interesting to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Britain and British culture and learning things about Britain for the first time, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.